Finally, humanity has gained the knowledge to go beyond the solar system. The excitement of the pioneers will lead us forward to the boundaries of the unknown. The days when knowledge of the universe was limited to concepts and theories will be a thing of the past. The line separating Earth from the rest of the universe has been erased, and we will push the dark boundaries surrounding our world deeper into space. From the speech of the President of the United Leadership of the Earth in New Moscow, 2117. Igor watched with delight as the perfectly polished cylinder, casting reflections in the rays of the sun, slowly docked with an elongated body of incredible size. I mentally named one of the compartments of a giant spaceship as a cylinder. The Ark, or as it was also called, the Ship of Generations. This triumph of human thought and technology gathered in the moon's orbit. A 25-year-old young man stared at the coordinated manipulations of the team, which from a distance resembled tiny toy figures. The space ark bore the famous name Tsiolkovsky, in honor of the famous scientist. Exactly the same, very close by the standards of the moon, was going to be a second similar ship, named Eden. The Tsiolkovsky will set sail in a couple of years. It will be the first ship of generations to be entrusted with the mission of colonizing a world suitable for humanity. Gliza 531, the planet's number in the space registry. Eden will leave a little later, in 5 years to another planet. Having received a unique opportunity to spread throughout the universe, people did not miss it. Cadet, a stern voice rang out, and the guy involuntarily turned to look at him. Nearby, a gray-haired man in his 50s with a bushy mustache and broad shoulders, wearing an official gray suit, stood with a displeased expression on his face. And even the slightly protruding belly did not spoil the statuesque appearance of his appearance. "Please listen to me carefully," the man said, carefully pronouncing the words to laughter from the group. "So the Tsiolkovsky will set off in 1 year and 7 months. And glancing sideways at the negligent listener, he asked, "Igor, do you agree with me?" "Yes," he replied clearly in a military manner. "I am glad of your attention. You will be the pilots of this ship." Turning towards the porthole, without being able to hide his admiration, he added, "The Ark. So we're going to drive it while the rest of the passengers are in hibernation?" One of the cadets frowned under the group's whispering. "It's not fair. We're going to die before—" "That's why, Mikhail. I keep saying how important it is to invite a teacher." The teacher frowned, clearly displeased with such an unceremonious interruption of the lecture. "If you had been more attentive, you would have learned the previously learned material, namely, that piloting the Ark will be carried out alternately. The crews will replace each other, while some are in a state of hibernation. Others control the ship." "Ah," said another careless cadet. "But all the same, it will take a very long time." The pale young man, who was obviously quiet in appearance, said quietly, "The way to Gliza 531 will take at least 134 years. "That's right, Alex," the teacher nodded in agreement. "And no one said that there would be an easy way. And you volunteered yourself." "Yes," Igor answered loudly for everyone. His eyes were burning. He was ready to hit the road right now. The young man's enthusiasm softened the angry reproach in the eyes of the wise man. "Well, let's continue. In addition to ordinary people, special people will be with you, so to speak." The teacher hesitated, apparently wondering if he had chosen the right words. "They look unusual." He paused. "You'll see for yourself." Moreover, he turned his gaze to the footsteps coming from behind the group. The cadets turned their heads at once, and a tall, thin figure approached them. "It can't be him," the guy muttered, covered in red freckles. "And who else?" Mikhail chuckled. "An adaptation," Igor thought. Adaptations appeared thanks to the Space Relocation Project. When scientists were puzzling over how people could pass through interstellar space, avoiding the danger of cosmic radiation, they created special hibernation capsules in which people could safely arrive in a state of suspended animation until they arrived at the planet. But you need to monitor the condition of the ship. You can periodically return people from cryo capsules, but not for a long time, a maximum of a year. Otherwise, accumulations of radiation can harm cells, and this in turn will affect future generations. As a result, by performing some manipulations, geneticists created a new kind of human, adapta. The uniqueness lies in the fact that his cells are not so susceptible to radiation, and he is able to live and, most importantly, reproduce in space. Biologists also thought about how to increase the population of adapts as cheaply as possible, and what could be more practical and convenient as natural reproduction. However, not everything is so simple. Adaptations are tenacious in space or on small bodies like the moon or large asteroids. If they find themselves on Earth, they will inevitably, and most importantly, a very painful death. The heart and blood vessels are not adapted to the gravity of the planet, as is the bone system. That is why adapts are called children of space. Igor couldn't take his eyes off the adaptation, which was almost 2 meters tall, with blue skin and turquoise eyes, in which there was a cold equanimity. He is not wearing a light blue cadet jumpsuit without insignia, but a black uniform of the Earth Space Forces with silver embroidery on the sleeves and lapels. "Greetings." The adaptation nodded slightly to them, passed on. People followed him with their eyes and hushed whispers. "There will be a couple of dozen of them on board the Tsiolkovsky," the teacher took the floor. "That little?" Someone from the group was amazed. "Why more?" The man shrugged his shoulders. "Do not forget, only the pilots will be lifted. And then for a while, the rest will remain in a state of hibernation. So this is quite enough to maintain the ship's operating systems. So let's continue." And with a decisive step, he headed deeper into the station. "Your internship will consist of—" Igor remained in place, unable to move, watching as the next compartment was attached to the main body of the Ark. "There's not much left, just 2 years. Anna looked impatiently at the wall clock, a rather old and generally unnecessary thing. She just loved such things that emphasized how much the world had changed and how inexorable time was. The implanted neurochip will indicate the right time, and more precisely, the old clock. But it's not interesting. It's much more interesting to look at the twitching arrows and listen to the measured beat. "I've arrived." The neurochip sent her a warning signal. The girl frowned. This thing once again deprives such a pleasant thing as a joyful surprise. The doors to the apartment opened smoothly and Igor literally flew in, with a happy smile all over his face. Anna also couldn't resist and rushed to meet him. "I missed you," the guy cooed after a long, gentle kiss, squeezing the girl tightly in his arms. "Don't lie," she snorted with a pleased expression on her face. "I'm sure you've been hitting on them all the time." "Yes," the cadet did not deny. "And they are beautiful, magical, and delightful." "Oh," Anna drawled mockingly, ruffling Tom's hair. "I'm starting to get jealous." "But not as much as you." Igor immediately got his bearings. "Liar," the girl whispered, kissing him. Then there was the night, the kind that is especially sweet after a long separation. Humanity was desperate to go into space, as if afraid to be forever stuck in the embrace of gravity of Mother Earth. Through thorns, disasters, disagreements, and hard work, people have achieved the desired result. But by that time, on Earth, which had been in peace and prosperity for more than 100 years, there were not so many people who wanted to rush into exploring the dark space of the universe. But they were real adventurers who were ready to fly to hell. Everyone has their own goal. Someone wanted to create a world radically different from Earth's, believing that peace on the planet was a temporary illusion, and the human race would once again descend into wars and habitual self-destruction, which is why they set off on the arc of generations. Someone was driven by the goal of exploring a new world, which is bound to be different. Others were attracted by the stars, like Igor. Since childhood he loved to watch them, to the fascinating light of colorful dots in the darkness. That's why I became a pilot of the Space Forces. I tried to reach the objects of my dreams, to get closer to them. And the day when he saw the stars while in space was forever imprinted in his mind. The stars are like a scattering of diamonds on black velvet, scattering the dark, cold darkness of the universe around them with bright rays like peaks. They didn't just beckon with their light, they bewitched, making you forget everything in the world. That's why Igor decided to participate in the Ark project. It took his breath away from the realization of what bizarre worlds he would see, what stars he would meet. At the academy, he met Anna, a girl like him who dreamed of distant space, but for her own reason. She also wanted to get into the ARC project and go to Gliza 531, even to another planet. Anna is tired of living in a comfortable world without problems and banal predictability. There was no room for heroic deeds in the prosperous life of the Earth. The trials had sunk into oblivion, and at the same time that feeling of excitement, the desire to rush forward, overcoming difficulties when the reward was a ghostly hope of success, had disappeared. But life on Gliza 531 promised difficulties to the fullest, and therefore satisfaction from the work done, which certainly gave meaning to existence. In 50 years, the moon has turned into a colossal construction site, with a real city sprawled on its surface, always drowning in colorful bright lights. And in its orbit, spaceships were created, so impressive in size that if they decided to rise from the ground, they would inevitably fall apart under their own weight. Automated factories were constantly biting into the surface of the Earth's eternal satellite, and driller ships were darting among the asteroids, choosing the right one, chopping, mining ore, and melting it down in space, sending it to the moon. The best minds of mankind have been realized in this project, and its strong qualities have manifested themselves. Often not the best. Be careful. The instructor, who has a stern face, a strong build, and a stiff, prickly brush on his head, already showed flecks of gray through his dark hair, barked. "Where are you going, you idiot?" Igor and Mikhail practiced a training battle on simulators. Sitting in capsules and virtual helmets, they raced through outer space with cheerful excitement, fighting a fictional opponent. And they were constantly getting into trouble. "What is it?" The instructor howled in irritation, stamping his right foot, casting an angry glance at the students. "Chasing the enemy!" Mikhail shouted to the barely suppressed laughter of the cadets. "Igor, cover up! Call each other by their call signs," the instructor growled. "Set aside the names. There is one clumsy move." Mikhail did not deny himself the pleasure of fooling around. "Why are you clumsy?" Igor was amazed, leading the pursuit in the virtual universe. His fighter kept up with the imaginary enemy, sending pale blue flashes of pulse charges after it. However, he dodged very smartly, and the line of shots went out among the stars. "What else should I call you? You've already died 3 times. This time the laughter of the cadets sounded even stronger, and immediately fell silent under the heavy gaze of the instructor. Tom also didn't like how frivolous the two of them were about the task, turning a grueling training session into a recreational pastime. The fighters should stick together, the so-called deuce, but being carried away by the pursuit of the enemy, weaving among asteroids and shipwrecks, they did not notice how they were separated. The instructor nervously stamped a couple of times, looking at the training capsules with such an expression that it is clear with what pleasure he would kick these two in the ass, in order to at least drive something into unreasonable heads. "Attention! You are under attack." The enemy fighters suddenly stopped running away, turned around at once, and rushed to attack. "I'm under the gun! I'm under the gun!" Mikhail yelled, having escaped death a couple of times. "Cover! You're under fire!" Igor's situation was no better. 2 people were rushing in his direction at once. "Come to me!" On the holographic monitor, the cadets could see the battle, and froze when their friends got into a difficult situation. Mikhail was running away towards Igor, who was being held in a pincer grip. "You are under attack," came the indifferent female voice of the alert program. A bright flash announced that Igor's fighter was destroyed. Mikhail lasted a second longer. The capsules shook violently at the last, and they fell silent. The blue light below them went out, and the magnetic field supporting them in the air dried up. The capsules landed heavily on the floor. "Leave the cabins," the instructor ordered. The cadets got out of the capsules, removing their virtual helmets. Who can tell me what is the main reason for the failure of these two? When the group heard the instructor's commanding tone, which did not bode well, they instinctively lined up. "You." The instructor poked a gnarled finger into the chubby cadet's chest. They did not keep their distance. The wingmen did not cover the leader. The latter began to explain a little haltingly. "Louder." The instructor raised his voice, turning to his friends who remained standing near the capsules. Puffy convulsively took a deep breath into his lungs. "It is necessary to keep a distance. If the number of the enemy exceeds the number of fighters in the wing, separation and pursuit of the enemy is considered unwise." The cadet spoke in a clear voice, quite loudly, and the cadets standing next to him even shuddered at such speed. The wingman must always cover the leader, thereby preventing the enemy from entering from the rear. More. The instructor raised his hand with a clenched fist, indicating that he should be silent. Do you understand your mistakes? Igor felt guilty for his frivolous behavior. I treated the training battle like a game, just like Mikhail. Why do we need the skills to fight in space with an enemy that quite possibly does not even exist? Mikhail asked the question, boldly looking into the instructor's eyes. Just in case, he replied calmly, folding his arms across his chest. We are pilots of interstellar ships. Our task is to fly arcs or transport starships. Why do we need fighter control knowledge? The cadet did not retreat. Just in case, as interstellar pilots, you should know everything about ships, how to control them, and what to press in case of danger. Okay, but fighting? Even on Earth, not a single shot has been fired in the last 100 years, and are you sure that the enemy is waiting for us there? It's on Earth. The instructor remained unperturbed, not taking his tenacious gaze off the impudent man. We don't know what awaits us there. He looked at the holographic monitor with the image of the universe. The group involuntarily followed his gaze. It is quite possible that we will encounter a civilization that, like us, is exploring space, or those who roam from planet to planet devouring resources, simultaneously destroying all living things. Are you so negative? Mikhail grinned. In relation to others? We're going in peace. I'm not sure about the others. That's why you should be able to fight, as I've already explained, just in case. And showing the end of the conversation, he gave the order. Alex and Oleg, your turn. Tikhon and Chub, having left the formation, approached the capsules, received helmets from their partners, and climbed into them. Where are you going? The instructor addressed Mikhail and Igor. Go to the gym and get him in order. Arrange the equipment by weight, wipe every corner. I'll come and check in 2 hours. The unlucky friends trudged off to the stifled laughter of the group to carry out the order. 2 hours later, the instructor came with a check, as promised. With a frown, we looked around the hall, dismissed 2 orders of tired guys. Going out into the fresh air, Igor luxuriantly flopped down on the green grass, leaning back against the rough trunk of a tree. A breeze blew, and he turned his face to it. It was so pleasant, even closing my eyes, as the wind gently caressed my skin. You have an expression on your face like you're kissing Anna. Mikhail's mocking voice brought the guy to his senses in an instant. The guy came up to him holding a couple of sandwiches in his hand. Here, one of them said. As you wanted, with cheese. Igor thanked him with a nod, unwrapping the rustling film, which immediately crumbled into pieces of organic material that did not harm the earth, and sniffed first. Mikhail, watching this, asked with a slight smile, Have you always wondered why you smell food first, and only then eat it? Igor was a little embarrassed. I just like the feeling. What? The friend did not understand, sitting down next to him, and also leaning on the wooden table. Well, Igor thought, choosing his words. Sensations, they give the very first emotions, the wind, the smell of food. He shook the sandwich. The touch. To Anna? Mikhail reacted immediately. So, before you do business with her, you sniff her? Don't be ridiculous. Igor waved him off. You just said that yourself. First of all, the sensations before the action are important to you. He nudged me in the side. And you are an entertainer. Stop it. Igor finally lost under the pressure of his friend, and found no other way out than to bite into the sandwich with his teeth. Mikhail, watching him, chuckled softly. The wind blew, and the lush crown of the tree stirred. Several leaves whirling in the air under the guy's gaze fell on them. Igor managed to put out his palm, and the green leaf gently touched his skin. Mikhail knocked down the leaves that had fallen on the jumpsuit with a snap. I signed up for a reconnaissance mission to Cassiopeia, M34, he said casually, taking a bite of his sandwich. Igor turned to him. Is it because of Liz? He smiled knowingly. Mikhail Zhuya nodded. Not only that. The mission to Cassiopeia is reconnaissance, to confirm that the planet is possibly suitable for colonization, along the way to study the area, and determine what kind of impulses the local star emits. Impulses? Mikhail bit into his food again. Scientists say they are quite interesting, or rather incomprehensible to them. By the way, Olaf also applied. Is it because of Liz too? Mikhail frowned. I don't think Liz is just mine. Wow, whistled Igor. Are you jealous? For what? A confident smile appeared on Mikhail's face. We have already connected with her more than once, so to speak. Igor grinned knowingly. So, you're going to Gliza 531, which means that in 2 years we'll break up forever. Forever. Such a thought, of course, visited Igor. But it was not perceived as clearly as it is now. Looking around at the academy building, at the green manicured park where cadets strolled along the paths of their red stone, at the sun, at the birds soaring in the sky, all this would become distant to him, and alien to his descendants. Our parents don't approve of the choice, Igor said with a sigh. They can be understood. You're just leaving them, breaking the bond forever. And you? Well, then I'll come back. After how many years? Mikhail thought about it. The journey to Cassiopeia M34 is almost 200 years, and all this time we will be in hibernation capsules. And those who are on Earth too? You can see from Mikhail's face that he seemed to be thinking about this for the first time. The friends finished their meal in silence. Soon, the only thing that will connect us is education and land. There's always a place to go back to, right? Mikhail nudged Igor encouragingly in the side. Gliza, Cassiopeia, Earth, Igor said slowly. Humanity is beginning to explore the universe. A wide smile spread across his face. It doesn't fit in my head. By the way, what's our next lesson? Technical equipment and the principle of gate operation. Ah, groaned Mikhail. Why do the pilots need all this? Our job is to control the ship, not to get into its wilds. There are mechanics and technicians on board for this, and even all these scientific terms. They make my head spin, and I assure you, one day, it will just explode. And you don't hammer her. Igor got up from the ground, extending his hand to Mikhail. He grabbed it and stood up. I wish I could, but it doesn't work out. And how do you handle everything so calmly? Igor shrugged his shoulders. I'm just listening, that's all, but I don't remember. Moreover, we have nothing to do with the gates anyway, and it doesn't matter what they tell me about them. Just look at the teacher, and that's it, and ignore what he says. It's a good plan, Mikhail agreed. Therefore, the passage of physical bodies through the energy of the gate is absolutely harmless to them. The professor had been explaining the principle of the gate's space and time to a quiet but not very attentive audience for an hour. Such dangerous phenomena as interstellar dust particles, asteroids, radiation, etc., in the gateway do not pose a threat. The aura that appears around the ship maintains a protective field until the ship passes through the next gate, and so on. The aura not only protects from the surrounding space, but also distorts the time inside them. The cadets listened attentively to the unhurried narration, as much as possible under the indistinct voice of the lecturer. The speaker, an elderly man in an immaculate white lab coat, his bald head shining under the rays of the lamps, did not seem to notice the inattention of the audience, and the fact that other cadets were openly sleeping in his class. His voice and pleasant semi-darkness contributed to this. Yeah? The professor jumped up happily when he saw the raised hand. The cadets also turned to look at her, more out of surprise, who needed clarification on the topic. Is moving outside the gate at that speed acceptable? Oleg asked the question. Absolutely not. The scientist rejected the assumption. It will not be possible to reach a speed higher than the speed of light outside the gate. Maximum possible sublight speed. Even if we manage to reach the speed of light outside the gate, all life on the ship will die, flattened by its own weight. Not to mention that elementary particles will pierce through any body. It was the network of installed gates that allowed the exploration of deep space to begin. The spaceship moves in them as if it were in a pre-laid tunnel, and the gates act as energy sources that feed this tunnel. What if the spaceship accidentally flies out of this tunnel? Even Igor is now interested in the answer for some reason. The professor ran a handkerchief over his bald head, which was sweating heavily under the lamps. I believe the spaceship will remain intact, but the crew will die if they are not able to immediately regenerate the damage to their bodies. And in another way, so far it is not possible to move through space? The professor shook his head. Not at the moment. We don't even have any idea in which direction to move, so that this very protective aura, as we call it, appears not in the gate, but directly on the spaceship itself, as well as reaching speeds above light. But you just said that the speed in the gate is faster than the speed of light? One of the inattentive listeners asked a question. That's exactly what's in the gate. The professor sententiously raised his index finger. If a starship is moving outside the gate, it will barely be able to reach sublight. Then how does it work out? There was a puzzled exclamation. And despite the fact that this was not the first time the scientist had explained this, he enthusiastically began to explain the technical structure of the gate again, hitting upon such scientific explanations as the magnetic field, quantum leap, particle-level singularity, and so on, which caused even the stoic Igor to turn into a petrified statue by the end of the lecture. After that, the group was tested according to the usual procedure. The cadet was placed in a capsule, a helmet was put on his head, connected to various sensors, and his consciousness was plunged into pitch darkness, in which bizarre patterns gradually emerged, similar to the rolling of lightning during a violent thunderstorm. They intricately intertwined with each other, forming flashes so bright and saturated that Igor felt his brain accelerating, pumping up with additional power. He was already buzzing from it. Everyone is free. A voice came from somewhere above, and the cadets, pretty tired, went to the dormitory. When the latter left the room, in a small hall with walls lined with silver tiles projecting data after testing, a company of 2 scientists and 1 man in a strict official suit gathered, emphasizing his belonging to the power structures of the planet. So, the official sat down at a table, putting his hands on it. What do we have? One of the scientists did not even think to restrain an involuntary grimace, to which the man condescendingly stretched out. Come on, Professor von Braun. You and I are working on a common case. Von Braun, a man with a strong-willed face and a hard look, sat down opposite the official. A trapdoor formed in the wall, and a small robot waiter rolled out, carefully delivering 3 cups of slightly steaming coffee. The second scientist quickly put them on the table, and the robot rolled away, disappearing into the wall. Thank you, Chan. Chan, von Braun's assistant, is a young man of Asian appearance. He got not only a characteristic squint, but also burning black hair, a thin build, flexibility, and the ability to be an indispensable, very skilled and efficient assistant. Chan sat down next to the professor. So, the official repeated, slowly stirring his coffee with a shiny spoon. What do we have, gentlemen? Very good results, Macron, very good. Von Braun pushed the cup away from him a little. We have selected the necessary candidates, admittedly. Their number turned out to be much smaller than we had hoped. Of the 20 groups, only 17 people. It's more than enough for the first experiments, said Macro, taking a small sip. It's wonderful. He sincerely praised the drink. Nevertheless, I must ask, do you guarantee that your idea makes sense? After all, it's not just about lives or resources that will be wasted if we fail. It's about our expansion into space. The ARC projects, Gliza 531, Eden, and even this one. Macro snapped his fingers, recalling. Cassiopeia M34 are just the first sprouts of our plan, and our plans are grandiose, he added meaningfully. It depends on them how ready humanity is to conquer the universe. Not to mention that your work formed the basis for the creation of planetary artificial intelligence. I am much more confident in myself than in your determination to go to the end, von Braun replied, punctuating every word. My research. He squinted at the assistant with an impenetrable face drinking coffee, corrected himself. Our research has proved the correctness of the approach. Macron raised his palms in a conciliatory gesture. Come on. Sighing, he turned his gaze to the images that kept replacing each other on the panels. There remains such a small thing as the ethical side of the issue. Hearing the snort, he glanced at Chan, who had set aside his cup. Our ships are becoming more sophisticated and, as a result, more difficult to control. Even an experienced team of the most skilled pilots and technicians is unable to respond properly in case of problems. And if they are too far from the ground, any mistake will lead to fatal consequences, he said quietly, Chan, without taking his gaze off the official, who for some reason felt uncomfortable. Artificial intelligence could solve this problem, but humanity has been trying to create it for the last 150 years. And the result has not progressed beyond deliberately introduced algorithms of actions. There was some success during the last war, almost 100 years ago, but it turned out to be fleeting and not so obvious. Professor von Braun, the assistant's voice showed genuine respect for his senior comrade, managed to find a way out how to create a truly powerful intelligence to control interstellar ships, and how not only to improve artificial intelligence, but to create a truly artificial intelligence. The professor has done a tremendous job, not so that outdated norms in the form of the ethical side of the issue would become an obstacle to its implementation. Chan uttered the last phrase with excessive sarcasm. As he spoke, the light of the panels changed, from light blue to bright green, then changed to scarlet light, which gave the assistant a certain demonism to his speech. Macro drummed his fingers on the table. He didn't like to mess with scientists, considering them arrogant types. "I've read your work," he said in a tone when admitting his guilt. "The idea of using the so-called personality simulation in AI is not bad, but isn't it the same as a predefined algorithm?" "No." Von Braun ran his finger over the mug. "This is akin to what a person experiences, the so-called emotions. It is from them that his behavior is based. So a personality is created. In other words, will the AI consider that he is a human? In no case, the AI will understand that his mind is artificial, and that this is an advantage over humans. The simulation of the AI's personality does not depend so much on those very emotions." Macron frowned. "I don't understand anything. It's unpleasant to feel like a fool, being a rather astute person. However, I'm not going to compete in your field. I realize how pointless it is. Much more interested in something else. Do you guarantee that the use of the human brain as a superprocessor will be successful?" "Yes," von Braun and Chan answered in unison. "But this is the human brain, with all its flaws in the form of emotions and other things," Macro cautiously remarked. "This will not be a problem. We will destroy their understanding of personality. All that remains is the brain's ability to speed, inherent in it by nature itself. It should be noted that the neural processes occurring in it could not be repeated when creating AI. So, a brain, an ordinary brain, will be able to control an archetype ship alone?" Macro did not notice how he pointed his finger at his head, as if trying to correlate the size of the brain and the giant interstellar ship, doubting that he would be able to do it. "But there are other problems. The brain is an organic joke. It needs nutrition. It can get damaged. Again, you need to figure out how to save it when using it." "Macron, are you sure you've read my work?" There was venomous sarcasm in von Braun's eyes and voice. "Everything is described in detail there." "Could you enlighten me?" The official gritted his teeth a little. Von Braun's face showed exactly the same expression when obvious truths are being explained to an unintelligent child. "The brain will be located in a special substance, to make it easier for you to understand, in a non-Newtonian fluid. This will allow it to avoid physical changes, and also protects it from sudden overloads, which entail a change and distortion of space. Nutrients will be supplied to this liquid, because as you subtly noticed, the brain is an organic thing. Nanorobots will be in this liquid. Their task is to keep it clean, provide nutrients to the brain, and, if necessary, treat it. Moreover, they are able to regenerate damaged areas in it." "Wow!" Macro was really impressed. "Nutrients, that is. Will it be necessary to feed the brain?" Annoyance flashed across Chan's face, not in the literal sense of the word. Automation will supply the necessary services to the sphere. At the same time, you should not worry about the quality. You can at least pour the methane. Nanorobots split everything down to the atomic level and create the necessary things based on them. Macron restrained himself. But when the nanorobots fail, then... Von Braun did not let him finish. They will never fail. They are programmed to maintain the necessary amount of themselves in the sphere. In case of failure of one unit, another is immediately created using its remains. Macron had no words. All he had to do was spread his hands in recognition of the genius of the scientist's idea. You really have done an incredible job, von Braun. In fact, you have created something that can become immortal. Nothing can and should be immortal. The scientist reacted coldly to the praise. It contradicts nature itself. But in such conditions, the brain can last for a very long time, measured in thousands of years. Thousands of years, Macro said slowly. It's impossible to even imagine such a long period of time. It's how much you can see and what new horizons you can overcome. However, the man's face changed, for some reason fiddling with a button on his sleeve. Existence within a sphere without... He hesitated, choosing his words. I would not wish for such a fate for myself. Your brain wasn't even considered a candidate, von Braun said dryly. Macro looked up in amazement, trying to understand the scientist's train of thought, as well as whether he was joking or was serious. Okay, he managed to squeeze out. So we have 17 potential test subjects. How much do you need? All 17 of them. What? All at once? But why so much? Von Braun picked up his cup anyway and took a sip of the cold coffee, just in case something went wrong. I have no desire to do nothing, waiting for the next batch of experimental subjects. However, the panels flashed with pictures of those whom the scientists selected for the experiment. It will still be difficult, and very difficult. I hope you are able to cope with your part of the task. Von Braun sipped noisily from a cup which caused hostility from Macron. Because it depends on how far humanity will advance in the exploration of deep space. And it's not for me to remind you of the situation of the Earth, experiencing a shortage of energy resources. We may be able to hold out for another 100 years. But the oil has run out, the uranium will not last long, and helium-3 has not lived up to expectations. It turned out to be too little on the moon. Of course we can use Mars or asteroids, but they turned out to be too poor for the elements we need. Humanity must explore space if it wants to survive as a species. No one likes to be thumbed in the face of responsibilities that they already know well. Or maybe the ethical side of the issue stops you? Chan asked quietly. Squinting, Macro squeezed out through his teeth. I'm already thinking about how to put the plan into action. The pictures that followed each other stopped, showing the face of one of the selected cadets. Igor, Macro read. You have no idea what the future holds for you.